is Shera Phillips. I'm coming with you live with Brother Shaq of True Love Movement. Give me a few moments just to share this video. And when you come on, go ahead and share. Tag people, share into groups, share on your page. And we'll get started in a minute or so. Alright. So as I'm doing this right now, how's your day been today?
Oh, wonderful day. Wonderful. What?
Good. It's been good. I'm a part of like 300 groups or something, so it's like, which one should I share this into? But let me just do this real quick. I gotta focus.
Yeah. Whatever you think is the right people.
And we definitely want you all to join in the conversation. You know, that's why it's live, so that we can get some feedback and we can answer your questions and greet you, and you can be a part of the discussion.
That's right.
So go ahead and get your questions and everything ready.
You got a whole lot happening over there.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get started now. I'll share a whole lot more later. So tonight, you all, I want you to know who we have right here. We have Brother Shaq, who is the director of the Men's and Boys Programming at True Love Movement, LLC. And the mission of True Love Movement is to empower Black people to achieve optimal health and wellness through counseling, education, community activism, and the production of creative arts and media, all of which promote self-awareness and self-love. And Brother Shaq does not do this work alone. He does this work with his beautiful, amazing partner, Mama Fire.
Oh, yes.
And I'm going to read a little bit more of his excerpt of his bio. He is a coach, educator, author, and radio host based in New Orleans, Louisiana, but organizes and serves in communities nationally. He emphasizes the social and cultural development of Black men in America. Brother Shaq has worked with schools, community organizations, churches, businesses, as well as in radio and entertainment, spreading the message of self-love and self-empowerment. As a respected advocate for Black-owned businesses and the critical need to recycle Black dollars, Brother Shaq is relentless in his efforts to raise the consciousness of the community to see themselves as powerful and sustainable. Now, right off top, I already got a couple of questions just based off reading the bio. What is it like? What does it feel like to be doing such important work and not to have to do it alone, to have the support and the input and the energy of a partner doing it with you?
It is incredible. I am so grateful for the vision of Mama Fire, and because this is True Love Movement was her conception, and the idea that she's done this work for a very, very long time, maybe around 15 or so years at this point. And, she having the vision and the courage to see our people well and wanting to offer a balanced approach to that wellness, kind of pulling me in there. It's been tremendous. So I'm honored to do the work, and I'm honored to have a partner in life, and really a partner in everything, who is clear about what's going to move it for our people. So yeah.
Okay. I think that what you guys do together is so amazing, and it's a lot of women and men out here who want to enter into a partnership similar to the one you have with your partner. And so, I guess when we talk about self-empowerment and self-love, how important are those things as it relates to relationships and love relationships?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's the whole thing. In other words, if oftentimes when you're looking at an outside in, or we're operating from a deficit perspective, like something's missing, so there's something that I don't have that I need to have. But in reality, once you gain a sense of your own power, it changes your entire world. It changes the way you create your world. And it also changes what and whom you attract into your experience. And so, one of the reasons why we're able to do what we do together is because we've done the work ourselves for ourselves. And we think that is the most responsible thing to do. And it's not norm, that's not part of our cultural norms, but it is in fact a necessary healing work. That if we don't do it, what we essentially are doing are looking for, our identity to be reaffirmed, looking for all kinds of things outside of ourselves, and we're trying to get other people to do that for us, and we've not even done it for ourselves. And so then when we do partner with those folks who are also operating from a deficit, we're each looking for something from the other. Like we're looking at what can we get out of the deal, and not having a sense of our own power to understand what we're bringing to the relationship. So that it ends up being a hustle, and we're hustling one another. After so long, people get tired of getting hustled, and they move on and try to hustle somebody else. At least that's been my experience.
I want to say thank you to those of you who have joined us. We have Felicia. She says, hey, Felicia. Tracy has said hello. Kimberly, hopefully I said that right.
Yeah.
She says hello. And again, anybody that has any questions, go ahead and put them out there. We're going to do our best to make sure we get to them. I want to ask Brother Shaq, what is your meaning or your definition of love?
Love, for me, I would define it this way. It is complete and unconditional, total acceptance of really self. I would start there. And the reason why I say that is because love isn't something we're going to find outside of ourselves or over there. It really does have to be this thing that you discover within yourself, and that you are lovable. And I think that it makes sense because, we're with ourselves for 24 hours a day, right? And we've been with ourselves for our entire lives. So if we're not completely good, 100% good with ourselves, unconditionally, then we really don't have any business trying to be with other people, because we're going to be looking for them to do something for us, as I said earlier, that we have not even done for ourselves. The idea of really being clear and authentic about what self-love is and really living that experience, that is the standard for all other relationships. So if you haven't done that particular work, it'll show in the other relationships that you're a part of, and the ones that you create or co-create, because you're still operating from a deficit. So it's fully embracing the truth, the real truth of who you are, the all of the other parts and all of the beautiful parts, and recognizing that you do have the power to define yourself in such a way.
Beautiful. Look, Michelle Marie says, how do you handle men who are emotionally unavailable due to their past? I'm assuming their past trauma, but even possibly it could be her past trauma for choosing men who are emotionally unavailable.
Well, handling men is no different than how you handle women or how we handle ourselves. Meaning, I don't really handle men or fix men, if that makes sense. I think that, again, gaining a sense of your own power is the very first step. So usually we begin with, what is your purpose? Why are you even alive at this particular time, right now? And what will be different about the planet once you're gone from it? And what we find is a great many of our brothers, most, haven't entertained such a question. And we're talking about people who are as young as, under 10 years old, and also older than 70. It's a very contemplative, introspective question that a great many people haven't entertained. And I ask that question because if we really start looking, we know history will instruct a lot of the work. And so when we start looking at history, we bump into those past traumas that may not have even been identified or recognized as traumas. And so there's a bit of work that goes into a man making the connection between his current behavior and past traumas, to be able to, for him to conceptualize when someone says, well, you're emotionally unavailable. Because, oftentimes we try to look at people and fix people and say, well, hey, you're emotionally unavailable. But to someone who's never even considered themselves to be an emotional being, that's a foreign idea. And they're going to deny it. They may become defensive. And they're still not going to move any closer to, being vulnerable enough to discover that.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. So that also brings me to something that I wanted to talk about anyway, because, well, first off, I find that we have to recognize patterns. Like, if you are consistently choosing the same type of relationship or partnership or situationship, then that is something that maybe you should explore or dive into and try to, figure out for yourself.
Right.
However, with that being said, I've heard so many gentlemen say, they've given up on love. They give up on women because women always choose men, like they don't want a good man. So for men who say, you know what, women, y'all say y'all want a good man, but y'all do not want a good man, what would you say to those individuals?
Well, I think that there's a lot in it, and that sounds like a simple question, but we're talking, the way folk generalize, and the idea of, good man, bad man, and that's all also subjective. But I think that when a man is clear about his impact in the world, he aligns with that. And so, the idea about someone choosing a man who's not a good man, that's deep. Oftentimes too, when you see that happen again and again and again, there's some healing that hasn't taken place. Now, when we talk about choosing a mate, we really act like we're choosing or picking out a coat. And like we're choosing something, and there it is over there, and I want that one. And that's very dehumanizing. But we're socialized that way in terms of ownership. So we look at the whole point of getting into relationships is to be able to own somebody. And so that's deep in the psyche, though. Listen, where did we learn how to even have relationships? You're talking about people who we've been in America under these circumstances for 400 years to the year. And so from, 1619 to 1865, we were on a plantation looking up at the slave master. And that's where we learned how to relate, by watching a man who raped our people, both women and men and children, and his own wife and all these other things. And this is our standard of what a relationship, well, particularly for men. I teach it, I call it, I said, this is our white dad. And we're looking up at him for, this is how you be a man, or manhood, or define masculinity. So that foundational relational piece is flawed. That's number one. And then number two, to look at the multi-generational dehumanization of, women, black women, in particular, those women who are politically designated as black. Like, there's been some heinous things that have been done specifically to black women for the same purpose of ownership and control. So these are the undergirding principles that many men, and both women too, are operating on in terms of forming relationships. And they haven't really been introspective enough to have the analysis on, where do I get these ideas from? They just know this is normative behavior, this is what you do. You find somebody, you select them. Like I say, you go get, I want that coat over there. And that has nothing to do with who that person is, what they've experienced, how healthy they are. Nothing. It's about what you want. So again, we're looking at people as, what can I get out of your deal? Which says that I'm operating from a deficit, because if I was clearer on what my impact was, I wouldn't be looking at things that way.
My cousin Tiasha is joining us. I just wanted to say, hey, cuz.
What's happening, cuz?
Yeah, and you know what, my cousin Tiasha, she just recently got engaged. And I want to tell you congratulations on the engagement.
Congratulations.
So we're talking about ownership, and I've actually experienced and have heard, women they like the idea, some of them, of being owned or belonging to someone.
There's history for that, definitely.
What do you think about that?
The idea of being owned? Well, I think that's part of the socialization. I mean, what we're taught, what we've been taught in America for 400 years is that black women are supposed to belong to someone, not that isn't themselves. They're supposed to be a part of, someone else is supposed to be in control of them, mind, body, and spirit, and that they are a possession. And so if we're all socialized that way, so if you're a black woman and you're socialized that way, there's a black man who's also been socialized that way that is looking to own, and so you found a counterpart. The trouble is we've got a weird perversion in my estimation as black people with ownership, because we've been owned as people, and that's been our experience in America. So what we do know about ownership is that with ownership there is control, and so the idea is to control another. That's what they're supposed to be controlled. Even the word bride and bridal means to control. And the woman is bridal, she's controlled. That's so she's a bride. Like that's why she becomes a possession of the man. This property, and this is written in legal statutes in America that black folks did not write, but there again, this is part of the dominant culture and our assimilation or desire for assimilation into that dominant culture by way of mimicking. So this is where we begin the idea of what relationships should be. This is our foundation. And so of course it's producing what it's been producing because it was set up to be disastrous.
Wow. I never really thought of that word that way before.
Yes, the definition is that's what it is.
Right.
Yeah, that's why when they say a woman is unbridled, that means she's out there loose. And so
it makes you think about a horse.
Exactly. Like property and what do you do with a horse? You break a horse. See how that works?
Yeah, or a stallion, because sometimes black women especially are called stallions.
Which is interesting too, because those are male. Stallions are male. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Wow, yeah.
But you have heard this, right?
I know I've definitely heard it, but I've heard a lot of these things that have origins that we're not totally clear about, which again doesn't make us bad people, but that's how we are socialized. Someone defines for us what something is, we accept their definition, and then we act it out.
Absolutely. I have a few questions here that were given to me by an anonymous person. Okay. One of them is, how do you know you found a good man or a good man?
How do you know if you found a good man?
Yeah.
Well, the man is going to be the one who's the clearest about that. So in other words, he'll be clear about what his power is. He'll also be very clear about what his purpose is. And his purpose won't be to control, other folk. And again, the word good is very subjective because it depends on good for what. Right. There's a long history of black men being identified as good for nothing Negroes. And that's good, meaning productive. What is this black man producing? And we have a legacy on the plantation for being what makes you a good black man is your ability to produce or reproduce rather on the plantation with children. That was the abundance. And that wasn't cultivating healthy relationships either. It was simply, that's what the function of the enslaved African man, what male was, because he wasn't a man, he was an enslaved African male. And that's been the legacy for African, or those of us who come to be called black in America, politically, that's our legacy. That's our legacy. And so a good black man would be a black man who is clear about his purpose and impact in the world, and how it is he can use that to improve the condition of our people.
So that makes me, so when you bring up purpose and everything, that makes me want to ask you, what is in your opinion, a conscious partnership or union or spiritual union, if you will?
Conscious, it's been it's a buzzword for a while. It just means awake. You know what I mean? It just means awake. But I think fully awake, like very clear about what we're doing, why we're doing it. There again, what is the purpose and what will be the impact of the union, and how do we measure that, and then how do we develop that as an institution while we're developing ourselves inside that institution. And very deliberately, or as I said many years ago, another thing that became a buzzword, like being intentional, and the power of intention in doing things on purpose. I think that would be why you would want to have a conscious, because you can predict the kinds of results that you'll get because you'll understand the investment. You know, you'll understand what you're putting in, and you're putting in something authentic for a very specific purpose that is aligned with the truth of who you are. So it ain't even just about having some kind of ambition to be great. It's about being clear about why you're alive and why your partner is alive, and how together you all are aligned to create or bring forth this thing.
Now, can you expound upon that, or give an example of that, or what do you mean by your purpose, why you're alive, her or his purpose and why they're alive, and how you come together in alignment?
The best example I can give is the conscious partnership that we're talking about, which is the one that I'm very proud of, that we continue to work very hard at. It's not effortless at all, but that partnership, that union, we have a beautiful history that goes back, more than 3 decades, which is helpful because of context. But that aside, when you have someone who is clear, who is awake, and knows who they are without you, see, that's the other one. Who a person is without someone else is the key, because of the idea that being alone equals being lonely, and that there's some deficit happening. People aren't always inclined to investigate and interrogate just the truth of who they are. So they're really relying on other folks to define them. They kind of handed it over. And so it's a very disconnected, disassociated way to live. But what it does is it ends up, doesn't really produce a whole lot on purpose. You may get lucky, but when you can be clear, you don't have to get lucky. You can do it on purpose. And so we're fortunate that, and when you do that work, you can attract, because you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are.
Say it again.
Well, I'm just saying in terms of the universal laws of attraction, not Brother Shaq, but you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And so understanding universal laws, being very authentic, and so integrity is a big one. It's a big part of that. And the integrity ain't for other people. The integrity is who you are alone with yourself. That's the thing that matters more than anything. Not the way people perceive you, but who you actually are. And there again, it requires some time to sit with yourself and really interrogate who am I? Why am I here? And then how best, so far, whatever I've been able to gather and cultivate, can we use that to improve or increase, what someone else is doing. So it's a thoughtful kind of a thing that's got to be rooted in, loving, obviously being clear about loving yourself, because you have to recognize yourself in the other person, authentically.
So when we talk about loving ourselves and doing the work of the self-love and the healing and going into the past trauma and to the baggage that some people call baggage. Does this mean that when you are in a union with someone who is doing their work, does that mean that there is that you don't have, you never get triggered, or you never like you fully actualize yourself. You have no, like, you're fully healed and you don't have any issues that arise because of your own self trauma or their own self trauma.
Oh God, of course not. You have that's an ongoing process. I mean, in terms of there's definitely going to be issues and triggers. It's part of the experience that we have. But I want to say, I also want to qualify that, and then of course that's across the board. But, and I know you're asking the questions, but just for the sake of, for the audience, and folks too, I would ask you, what do you think that in order to survive what our people survived on that plantation, what do you think they had to give up? If you had to sum it up in one word, what do you think they had to give up to survive? Which is just not die. It doesn't mean anything else. It just means they didn't die. Because we're here, so they didn't die. But what did they have to give up?
The first thing that came to my mind may not actually be what you're thinking, but I would say their humanity.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. That is, because that's a fact. And but I mean, like even if we interrogate their humanity, meaning their ability to feel and express themselves and have, you know, control and agency over their bodies and their time and their personhood, that wasn't a part of their experience. That wasn't a part of our ancestors' experience for 244 years. But we were still producing children. And so they were learning normative behavior. So we saw so much trauma. I mean, this is terrorism. That's the whole idea. So we've got ancestral trauma. And when we witnessed some of these heinous things that happened on the plantation, there was no therapy. There was nobody to sit down and I just need to breathe and be consoled. None of that. So our skill set collectively has been underdeveloped and suppressed and arrested for that reason. So we don't even really know how to cope in ways. So what I say is happening now in this time that we're in is we are approximately, we've been off the plantation for 90 years. Well, let me say it better. We were on the plantation 90 years longer than we've been off it. That's almost a century. Like we were on the plantation for 2.5 centuries. We've only been off it for a century and a half. So we're almost a whole nother century till we get to the midpoint of on the plantation, off the plantation. And I'm saying 90 years, which means the people who are watching this broadcast, you and me, are not even going to be here in 90 years. And the reason why that's significant is because we're talking about a multi-generational process of how we come to be the way that we are here today in 2019. And so that means there's not going to be a single event for the collective of us or for individuals of us that is going to absolve that. It's just going to shift that immediately. Not one single event. It's going to also be a multi-generational process. So I'm saying all that to say it is critical for us to interrogate why we are here alive right now, because we're not going to be here in 90 years just when we get to the halfway point. We're just now coming into the consciousness of the magnitude of what has happened to us, the way we've been dehumanized. And then now we're looking at how that dehumanization rubs up against the tender parts of our other brothers and sisters who've also been a product of this, who don't have language for it, who've got collective low self-esteem, who don't have an analysis for any of these things. And because they don't have the historical context, the only thing that they can be left with is that there must be something wrong with me. So then they feel shame, then they feel guilt, then they feel all these things, and then they got somebody over there telling them, well, you ain't supposed to have no problems, which is code for you ain't got no coping skills. Why you tripping? You know, that's what that means. So so there's a lot of things happening that we're just really beginning in 2019. I mean, again, that's been happening for a long time, but it's picking up a little more momentum for us to be like, man, look at what they did to us. And having an analysis, a collective analysis for that, for what that trauma looks like, how it is manifested. So we're not even in the realm of turning it around just yet. And that's reasonable for the 154 years we've been away from it. I mean, that's only, most of us have family members who are in their 80s and 90s. So we're talking about their grandparents were on the plantation. We're just talking about 5 generations. It ain't been that long. So I'm saying, I think a lot of what we're experiencing with one another right now in terms of the challenges is very normal given, or normal responses given to the multi-generational dehumanization that we've suffered as a people.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. I'm gonna move to a question that was anonymously sent to me.
Sure.
And it says, what do you think about the trend of open relationships?
Well, that's come up a whole lot. I don't know that it's even as much of a trend as it is an inevitability. I think that the relationship model that we're currently, that's normative behavior or normative culture in America, is rooted in the control of the patriarchal society or of the dominant culture. So the idea is of monogamous sort of relationships and monogamous unions is just normative behavior. It's not necessarily natural, but it's become a cultural thing because that's what the culture's done. And so now, as people are challenging gender roles and gender binaries and racial constructs and everything else, the idea of the way we relate to one another is also on the table. Like, is that wrong? Like, while we're changing all these things, shouldn't we look at that? So I think the idea of open relating is inevitable, and it's necessary, I think, for people to be able to reach their full humanity, because we talked about what we had to give about humanity. And I know some folks might not connect open relationship with humanity, but much of the confusion, I think, that exists within people and in between people is because we simply do not know who we are, untampered with, uncontaminated with in America. We just don't know what our nature truly is. And so we have stuck with the paradigms that we've inherited and that have been projected onto us as normative behavior. We haven't challenged them really. But when we think about it, it's good cause to look at those kinds of things, because here we are with a very good opportunity, particularly for the young folks like yourself who are challenging these things for everybody. Like, well, let's look at this. Let's look at it, what we've been doing, and see how it's been serving us. And if it hasn't been serving us, then let's be brave and let's be bold enough to say, well, we're going to try something different. Because the question about open relationships or even monogamous relationships is integrity. There's a misunderstanding about, I think, the way the trend of open relationships has been presented, in much the way like polygamy and all these other kinds of things have been presented, that it's just a pass to, go do all these other things sexually with all these people. But really, in order to even, I think, have an effective open relationship, you've got to be good at having an effective monogamous relationship. And some of the same challenges, I think, are in both. But it really begins with, what is your relationship with yourself? Because that's the standard. So there again, if you're operating from a deficit, and you've done it here with this person, and now you're trying to do it with somebody else and 3 or 4 other people, you're still going to have, very low quality, problematic, unfulfilling relationships, whether we're talking about a monogamous relationship or if you're open related. So it's not the concept of an open relationship or the monogamous relationship that is a cure-all for anything other than a real deep dive and understanding about who you are truthfully and what it is that your soul really, in fact, needs to reclaim your humanity.
Okay. And so let's maybe move a little bit more into like the intentional intimacy part. And so When we talk about intentional intimacy, what is that?
Intentional intimacy. Well, something that is intentional, it's on purpose, but it's a little bit deeper than purpose, because that means you got some things in your mind. Like the metaphysical part of it, like this, man, I wanna create something. We are creators. As black people, we are creators. That's why we were kidnapped here, because we can make $1 out of 15 cents. We can do all these things. We can imagine something that isn't there and give it physical form. So we're a powerful people, and we're even more powerful together when we're clear. So when you take that kind of intention and you are intimate, and intimacy is not simply sexual either. There's an authenticity and a vulnerability that goes along with being intimate, and it's often, reduced to simply sex because of the gratification that sex or sexual contact or sexual intercourse offers people. However, looking at sex that way as a relief and a release from something that's less desirable, there again you have folk who are using this thing as a control mechanism to control their moods and other people's moods and all those kinds of things. So it gets kind of diluted. And
when you say control your mood, you mean somebody may be feeling down or depressed, and they know that some forms of intimacy make you feel better, and so they'll use that as a way to feel better?
Absolutely. Without interrogating why you're down. See, whenever you're feeling any kind of way, up or down, and I'm just using that as simple terms, there are reasons for that. And so the idea of the intentional intimacy is about what is your relationship with yourself, and you can determine what's driving this particular mood. What happened before that? What am I really trying to do? So it's intentional intimacy ain't really much different than intentional eating. It's the same part of your brain that's looking at the food and saying, I'm going to have this food because it's going to be transformational for me, not transactional. And I'm having it because I'm clear about the nutrients and what my body requires, and when that happens, how my body's going to respond. And I'm deliberately doing that for me. That's an act of me loving myself. If we were talking about food, but it's the same thing with the intentional intimacy. And if we're talking about the sexual part of it, it's when you are together co-creating or birthing or at least impregnating ideas. Like, by biology, the black woman is superior in that, because everything that's ever been produced of any value to the world has come through a black woman. Everything, bar none, without exception. Because even when somebody says, well, there was a man that did such and such, well, where did he come from? He came from a woman. So there's no way around that in terms of the creativity, and that's part of the feminine energy in all of us, that whole idea of creativity, and then the process of actually cultivating and creating something. So when you do that with someone deliberately, the power of that intention, but we're talking about mind control, mind power. And first of all, your mind got to be yours in order to even do this. But when you do that on purpose, you can produce beautiful things. You can produce businesses. You can produce children. You can produce, products. You can produce services. You can do all kinds of things, and you're doing it, with a partner. It's incredible, and it's y'all ought to try it sometime.
Hey Tonio, he said, I can see a film with this subject matter. This subject matter is very broad and very deep and wide, and I really enjoy digging into it. I was reading recently, and I've also experienced where, since we're talking about intimacy, where sometimes what people really, what they really crave is closeness. Yeah. But they don't necessarily, or maybe not necessarily able to make the distinction, and so they substitute closeness for sex, or but really they desire intimacy or closeness. What do you think about that?
That's a natural, normal human thing. You think about it, you can remember, and most of us, or a great many of us can, some of us like me a little bit older, but you know, the closeness of a mother with a newborn on her breast. You know what I'm saying? Like being held by your mother, for example. We think about that in very external factors, but we have to look at that relationship between the mother and the child. And I'm only focusing on the mother and the child and taking absolutely nothing away from fathers. But I do know that in terms of mothers and mothering, you look at this whole event process dynamic, or masculine and feminine. You know, we know masculine energy is an event, feminine energy is a process. And we've got both. We all have both. But something about your mother, because when she selected the sperm that she wanted, which she would be the fastest sperm, here we go. When she released the egg, because she selected, right? She selected that. So that means they got a million sperm went by, she said, no, that. And so she selected and released that egg at the right time to begin that process of getting us here. In about 9 months, give or take, she gets us here. She's eating, we're feeding off of her, literally. And then after about 9 months, she actually gets us here. She gets us out of her body, here into the world, out of the amniotic fluid, into the air. And so, and then on the same day, very soon after, she already knows we're hungry, we're crying, we don't have language. She puts us on the breast and she feeds us. Now that's real closeness, because this is somebody who knew you before you knew yourself. And so that's a closeness that, if cultivated properly, it sits in us. Now, so that's maybe our barometer for what close is like, and that's not sexual, but that's just close. And so there's a desire for that, and so many folk who struggle, that I know, who I work with, who struggle with intimacy, and who often will substitute sex for that, are looking for that closeness, that closeness that really is relief. There's a lot of misunderstanding about our people and our condition, that we need help. Black folk always need help. But I'm saying, no, black folk don't need help, because help is simply assistance. That's what help is. Help is assistance. And if you always need help, that's saying that you're operating from a deficit. And that's not really the case. Food, clothing, shelter, and love. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food, clothing, love, shelter, transportation, love. Okay. If you don't have any one of those, or you're missing any combination of those, you're not stable. And you will need some help to fill some of those gaps. But if you have all of those, that you have command of those, you have relief. That equals relief. And relief is just reassurance that everything is going to be okay. So the deficit model is, because I don't know who I am, I don't know why I'm alive, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, I've had no sense of my own power, I don't even like myself, I've got messages that I ain't nothing. So I'm looking everywhere but the mirror to find love. And so I'm actually looking for some physical closeness with somebody because I feel empty. But when you think about how disrespectful is it for you to bring your emptiness to somebody? Like, why do they deserve your empty? But we have a long message in America that black folk are to be extracted from. So we prey upon one another, trying to see, let me see what I can get out. Everything is a hustle because there's a deficit here. So the idea is you can't really be intimate with anyone until you've been intimate with yourself to understand what that even is. So So if you're looking for other people to do that for you, you'll just be looking for person to be. That's why there's some people say, I can't sleep alone. I just don't want to be alone. I hate being alone.
They jump from relationship to relationship.
That's the pattern you talked about.
Yeah.
That's the cycle, because they're looking for themselves. That's the real kicker. The person, what they're looking for is right there in the middle. But they've already been conditioned and socialized that there ain't no value in that. So I'm looking everywhere. But the common denominator was always there. So they got this trail of relationships that people that they've destroyed, and they still don't have what they were looking for because they were looking for themselves all the time.
Right. What are some ways that a person can be intentionally intimate without, substituting one thing for another, substituting sex for intimacy?
You know what's real intimate? Like truth. Truth. And if you're not accustomed to, and you're not that with yourself, it ain't gonna really work out in intimate situations. And one of the things that prevents truth is shame, guilt, and the idea that there's always you're rewarded for the way people perceive you. So a lot of times folks would want to be dishonest because there's a reward in it if people perceive you as such. So, truth is a very intimate thing, because when you can do that with and for yourself, you can exchange that with someone else. So that's an intimate situation, because you all are telling each other the truth. You're not keeping up appearances. You don't have any fear in that connection, because you're not, and the reason that fear exists is because there's loss. So it's like all of those kinds of things, we bring those, we carry those around with us because we don't know that we can confront them. And we also know that you'll only confront a thing to the extent that you feel confident that you can resolve it. So that means if you don't know what to do with you, you ain't fixing to deal with you. You gotta deal with other people. Now, you're not gonna be very effective with them either, but at least we're gonna focus on it. And that'll run its course, and the whole gamut. So the truth is a very intimate thing, and really it's a human thing. That's part of the humanity that we left behind, is the truth. Like, something has affected me, something has impacted me. I have a feeling, a real feeling about it. I may have language, I may not have language, but I can be safe to express myself authentically. And we don't create those kind of spaces for one another often because we know we can't. And we've never done it for ourselves. That's what I'm saying. If you don't take care of your own business, there's just no way you're going to be effective with other people to the degree it becomes irresponsible. That's the thing. It just becomes irresponsible at some point.
That's very, very valid, and people. I mean, I know for myself, it needs to be explored. The purpose or the reason behind the desires that we have. But for some of those who have been doing work and they are looking just for some ways to be intimate, and actually I've written down a few, and I want to hear what you think about them.
Sure. Definitely.
So hugging for 3 to 5 minutes and just sinking into the hug and just feeling everything that comes not in a sexual way, but in an intimate way. What do you think about that?
I think that's great. I think that's, you got the heart, feeling the heart with that. Usually when we're talking about intimacy, we are talking about some kind of a feeling, because it is about the feeling. It's what I call downstairs. It's here. This is upstairs, that's downstairs. And America teaches us to keep it upstairs, because that way, you see, our feelings are what compels our behavior. It's the feelings, those are the things that inspire us. The thoughts more or less kind of motivate us, which is a different kind of a thing. And so I like that. I like the idea of hugging, of being physically close, physical touch. What do black folks say? Black folks always ask the question, you feel me? Like we're trying to get back to ourselves. We want to be felt. We really want to be felt because it reestablishes a connection that we have that's been severed. I said connection, not attachment. Connection that's been severed historically. And the idea of feeling is an intimate thing. Even when we want you to feel these hands, that's also intimate because you're sitting there pounding on flesh, inflicting pain because you want somebody to feel you. There's a deep part in the recesses of your mind that if you felt what I was feeling, you wouldn't do this.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? And so we're trying to communicate in a language that is just simply not sophisticated enough to be able to convey all that we could experience and think in our bodies, here in America as black folk.
Another one, and then we'll move on, is staring into each other's eyes and maybe even verbalizing what that makes you feel or what you see when you look into that person's eyes. And sometimes you may see familiarity, or sometimes people say that's the window to the soul. How do you feel about that?
I love it. I think that's one of the most intimate things. They also say the eyes never lie. There's a song that I really like by it's an old song, but it's by Shera Phillips and Will Downing. It's a duet, and I was playing it for Mama Five. She hadn't heard it before, but it's a beautiful song. And part of the hook, it says, "I believe that there's a doorway to me inside of you," and that's because the name of the song is called Reflections, and that's what you're talking about. When you're looking in someone's eyes, you are reflecting on yourself and how you see yourself in that person. So that's very intentional because you're looking for yourself over there, and that's what strengthens or solidifies the connection, or informs you that there isn't a connection.
Wow. So you think looking into someone's eyes can make you help you to know or see that person and you do not really share a connection?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're looking to see what's there and not looking with an agenda, you're bound to see what's there and not deceive yourself.
Wow.
See, that's what I'm saying. Part of the deal is that we tell ourselves what we got to do. This is how it's got to go. So we're on a mission. So we got an agenda. And we're not seeing all of the signs that say, no, this ain't this. This is like what happened before. We ain't seeing none of that. What we're seeing, in fact, is I'm going to shoot my shot. Kind of a thing, because you're not even considering the other person. Like, see, so much of what we're socialized to do is deeply impersonal, deeply dehumanizing. We don't call it that. We just call it wrong.
So the question was, well, we'll start with this one. What does self-love mean for black men?
So, for this black man, self-love has everything to do with, like I said, being clear about why I'm here alive on the planet, in terms of my purpose. What'll be different about the world once I'm gone? Understanding I'm not going to be here forever, and that I have a serious obligation to my great grandchildren and beyond, because there's something very significant that I need to do while we're here. And so that ends up looking like, everything runs through that lens. It's just me loving myself. So in order to love myself, I got to be very, very clear about my own humanity and recognize myself in other folk, and when that happens, you can tell, because you got someone who's building and not destroying. You got someone you got a black man who really is thinking about his impact on the world, and what is this decision going to mean for so and so, and is that aligned with who I am, and is this me loving myself? Because one of the greatest challenges in America with this dichotomous thinking is that everything's in opposition. Men and women are opposite sexes. Craziness. Because, how you going to be opposing how you gonna be opposing one another? Because when you're in opposition, you are adversaries, you're enemies. So that thinking right there is so flawed and so dangerous and so damaging to it, but it's a cultural norm that's accepted. And so operating off of that ain't loving yourself. So there's a lot of work that a black man does that is ongoing. It's not an event. It is certainly a process to really come into the loving of himself. But it reflects outward. It really, really does. It reflects outward how he engages with other people, black men and black women, black children alike. So it's a journey. It's a process, and it's ongoing because, you know, there's so much in us that has been socialized without our consent that we haven't even begun to interrogate yet. So to your question earlier about, you know, no more triggers, no more issues, no more, it's like, no, not at all. They got stuff in there you don't even know is in there till somebody stand on it or bump up against it, like, well, where'd that come from? Well, like, it's just more work to do.
Now, for your self-love, is that something you have to do totally on your own, or can you get assistance with that, or should a person not even venture to want to assist you with that? You should do that on your own.
There's nothing anybody can do. Like, there ain't nothing anybody else can do for you. The best they can do is support you on your journey, but there ain't nothing for them to do because it's really about you. The reason I say that is because the conditional aspect, meaning if you would just do this, then I could love myself. Now we done created some other stuff. Like, that ain't got nothing to do with that. It ain't about what you do or what you don't do. If you're doing things that are against me in that way, then maybe this ain't supposed to be this. Maybe that's what it is. It ain't about trying to control somebody else's behavior to get them to acquiesce. That's how come other people actually get in your way. This is a personal journey. This is a personal journey. But, you know, when you emerge from that, man, oh man. And you're so much better for the world. So much better for the world.
Okay, so another question was, what do you suggest women do when they realize that they're in an abusive relationship and they're concerned about their family or their children? And
what are they when they realize?
Yeah, because I mean, when I see this question, I think about when they realize they're in an abusive relationship. You know, obviously there are some forms of abuse that go below the surface or go unnoticed, but people don't even recognize that this is abuse. Because I mean, I think most people agree that physical abuse is abusive. While I do think that there are probably some people who still may not necessarily equate that to abuse.
Right. I think, you know, I don't really give women a lot of advice because I've never been a woman, and I think that the complexities of what women have to consider and weigh out are extraordinary in a patriarchal society. And so, you know, that's a complex question that I would say, you know, to evaluate, I think, for themselves how they came to be in the situation, because before it became abusive, what we're talking about, physically, emotional, mentally, financially, whatever the abuse was, there were some signs along the way. And to interrogate what prevented them from seeing those signs. And I'll give you the answer, because I already know what the answer is. At that point, they hadn't loved themselves. The idea of getting out of that kind of a situation is an indicator that the loving yourself journey has begun. But it's still begun. It's in infancy. And then you realize it's no different than a person who might use drugs or alcohol or some kind of substance, and one day stop or one day realize, man, I gotta stop this, and then they actually stop. Well, things just don't get great because they stop. They end up looking and realizing they have created an entire world for themselves that's rooted in all kind of dishonesty and mess and chaos because it wasn't born in love. So, you know, distancing and removing themselves from that becomes a process, a very tenuous process, because like you mentioned, for the sisters, they got children, they got what have you. But I always say to people, when they face with hard decisions like that, what happens if you don't? Like, what happens if you stay in this situation? And we know statistically, if women who are in abusive situations often die, particularly black women, eventually they get killed. You know what I mean? Or the children get killed, or everybody gets killed. You know, there's a lot of history that tells us that. So I think the best thing to do is to be honest with yourself right out of the gate. And I would ask too, how is that a relationship that was rooted in a deficit? That's what I'm saying. Like, not loving yourself ends up being irresponsible on so many levels, because it puts us in places where we're putting ourselves at risk because we got some kind of deficit, and we're saying, well, at least I got this. I'd rather have, you know, this piece of man than no man, because I need a man, and then, you know, we're not having conscious or sacred sex where we're creating a conscious conception where we're making children. Like, stuff is just happening, and we're not really being intentional about it, and so then it produces very undesirable results. So I think there's a lot of investigation that has to go on with the sister in the process of removing herself physically from that situation.
Very good. Very, very good. Like, I cannot wait for us to go ahead and schedule a part 2 along with you, myself, and Mama Fire.
Yeah.
But right before we end this live, could you give us a short list of some of your favorite reads, some of your favorite books?
Short list?
Yeah.
Short list.
A short list.
Okay, so right now, my favorite read is Resolving Rape Culture, which is the book I'm wrapping up, that I'm writing. That's my favorite read right now because I'm fully immersed in that. That should be coming out inside of the next month or so. I'm really, really proud of that book and that work. It's Resolving Rape Culture. It's fascinating, deeply personal, and also very introspective on my own, but it's a collection of many things. And I'm proud of that work, and divinely inspired by True Love Movement, by Mama Fire, and the work, the personal work that I've done, but also the personal work I've supported with other brothers and others. And so that's my favorite read right now. Right after that, it would be Keep It High, Thoughts in a New Light by Ayana Molina. It's another fascinating book that is a follow-up to her first book, which would be my third, Runaway Girl, which you talk about being vulnerable. Man, I've never read a book that was so vulnerable and so honest and really so inspirational, that has inspired me and continues to inspire me. It also strengthened my own work and my own relationship with myself as a man. Those would be the top 3. And then beyond that, I really like the ISIS Papers by Frances Cress Welsing. Magnificent book that examines, whiteness and the dominant culture here in America, the psyche of whiteness. So those would be my top 4 reads for right now. Anyway, I've got lots of books. I've read a lot of books, but I've read enough books to write books now. So that's where I'm at with that.
So I want to thank you for doing this conversation. I want to thank you all
brave.
for joining. Yeah, it was.
This is brave. I want to thank all the people who tuned in too, man. I hope they'll share it. I hope they'll be looking out for what we'll do if it's okay with you.
I was just about to.
What?
Tell them to go to the website and to
tell them.
So TrueLoveMovement.com. We also have Mama Fire has her debut album.
This is the second album. The follow-up album.
Her follow-up album is set to release very soon.
That's right.
And what's her? I put your True Love Movement Facebook page up here.
Uh-huh.
I also put the website, which is TrueLoveMovement.com.
That's right.
What's the Facebook page for Mama Fire?
Fire, FIYAH, Like Ayana.
Fire like Ayana.
That's right. Because Ayana means beautiful flower. You know, and she sure enough is a beautiful flower. Sure enough.
Absolutely.
Sure enough.
So, y'all have a wonderful night, and we'll be announcing when this next follow-up conversation will be.
Right, and I thank y'all thank you for having me on, because we think it's an important conversation, and I'm really honored to be here with you and proud that you had the courage to ask some tough questions, and you had me on, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Right on.
All right.
So now we are going to say good night.